The series kicks off at a frozen Alaskan airport. A group of high-risk prisoners is being loaded onto a transport plane bound for Washington. Among them is a mysterious man named Havlock. Unlike the others, his face is deliberately covered by a mask, causing the other convicts to stare at him in confusion. But Havlock isn't just sitting there. He has a nail concealed on his person and is quietly picking the lock of the chains binding him. Suddenly, chaos erupts. The plane catches fire mid-air, and the fuselage tears open, sucking many prisoners out into the freezing sky. Havlock manages to unlock his chains, free his hands, and immediately begins beating the officers on board, taking control of the crashing plane.
Miles away in the rugged Alaskan mountains, a local man is sitting with his son. He is shocked to see a burning plane falling from the sky. He grabs his son and they sprint away just before the massive wreckage crashes down on their position. The plane is destroyed, but there are survivors, prisoners who manage to scramble out of the debris and escape into the wild. At this exact time, the town's supervising marshal, Frank, is out for a morning jog through the snowy streets. He returns home to have breakfast with his wife Sarah and their teenage son Luke. Frank asks Sarah to join him for lunch with a friend later, but Sarah apologizes, saying she's too busy. Luke chips in, telling his dad he'll be home late because he wants to hang out with friends. Sarah, the protective mother, asks him to come back early and stay safe, but Frank plays the cool dad, interrupting her to give Luke permission to stay out late, which makes Luke happy.
Frank heads to the station, bringing donuts and sweets for his deputies, joking around with the team. But the mood shifts instantly when a report comes in. Heavy smoke spotted in the northern sector. They don't know the cause. Frank boards a helicopter with his team and flies north. They find a war zone, a burning plane wreckage and dead officers scattered on the ground. Suddenly, a group of surviving prisoners emerges from the smoke and attacks them. The marshals defend themselves in a brutal firefight. Frank beats back several attackers, but they are overwhelmed. He and his team scramble back into the helicopter and barely escape the site. News of the disaster reaches the highest levels. The CIA director, Bradford, orders an officer to bring in a specific agent named Sydney immediately. She tells her team that Sydney is the key to stopping Havlock. We cut to Sydney attending her niece's birthday party. She knows her sister is aware of the treason charges hanging over her head and that intelligence is about to pull her in for interrogation. Right on cue, officers arrive and demand she come with them to meet Bradford. Sydney goes. Bradford drops the bombshell. The plane carrying Havlock crashed in Alaska, and Sydney is required to hunt him down. Bradford instructs Sydney to go to Alaska, gain the trust of Marshal Frank, and trick him into believing he needs her help to catch the target. Back in Alaska, Frank puts the town on lockdown. He orders roadblocks and alerts the hospital of a state of emergency. We learn Sarah is a nurse there. The ER is flooded with injured victims from the crash site. Stressed and terrified, Sarah calls Frank to check on him. He assures her he's fine. A town-wide emergency is declared, warning citizens that 18 dangerous prisoners are on the loose. Oblivious to this, Luke picks up his classmate, Kira, to go hang out in a secluded spot, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding in town.
Sydney arrives in Alaska. Frank is immediately suspicious. He demands to know why the U.S. Marshals weren't notified about a prisoner transfer on their turf. Sydney reveals the route was changed last minute, a secret known only to the CIA. She inspects the bodies of the dead prisoners and confirms Havlock isn't among them. She tries to hide this from Frank, but he gets annoyed. He tells her his town is in the crosshairs, and while she knows she's there for Havlock, she needs to help him catch the others too. He demands full transparency. Sydney finally opens up. Havlock was a top-tier CIA operative who went rogue. He became a spy, aiming to bring down the U.S. government. She reveals she was the one who recruited and trained him. He used his inside knowledge against the agency, was eventually caught, and was en route to trial when the plane went down. Frank heads to the hospital to check on a friend injured by a convict. While there, he speaks to a survivor from the plane who is faking an injury. This man tells Frank that a monster named Havlock was on board, warning him that Havlock is dangerous and caused the crash. Just then, a call comes in from a local resident screaming about a criminal intruder. The team rushes to the house, thinking it's Havlock. It turns out to be a different prisoner who attacks them, but Sydney steps in and eliminates him.
A moment later, Sydney shows Frank a photo of Havlock. Frank freezes. He realizes the survivor he just spoke to at the hospital, the one who warned him, was Havlock.
He frantically calls Sarah to warn her, but she doesn't answer. Havlock has already kidnapped her. Frank rushes to the hospital, but she's gone. Meanwhile, Luke's car breaks down, stranding him and Kira at his family's old abandoned house for the night. Frank explodes at Sydney for withholding the photo, shouting that he could have caught Havlock if he'd known. He accuses her of hiding something bigger. Sydney admits the truth. The CIA wants to kill Havlock, and once he's dead, they'll kill her to tie up loose ends. She needs to catch Havlock first and hand him to the FBI to save her own life. Frank, disgusted by the lies, tells her he doesn't want her help and will hunt Havlock alone.
Frank discovers that all communication lines and internet in the region have been deliberately cut. Sabotage. He receives a video message from Havlock. It shows Sarah alive. Havlock promises not to hurt her, provided Frank agrees to his demands. Sydney calls Director Bradford, who reveals the stakes. Havlock stole a physical file from the archives containing every CIA operation, past and future. If leaked, national security is destroyed. They need him found now. Frank finds Sydney and screams at her, but she calms him down, insisting Havlock won't hurt Sarah because she's his only leverage. She reminds Frank that she knows Havlock's mind better than anyone. Reluctantly, Frank agrees to work with her again. Frank learns Havlock broke into his home to find leverage. Sydney explains he was profiling Frank to learn how to manipulate him. Frank finds Sarah's necklace dropped on the floor, deepening his fear. Elsewhere, a mother driving with her kids is stopped by an escaped prisoner named Henry. Instead of attacking, Henry asks to be driven to the police station. He walks in and surrenders.
Havlock sends Frank a recording of Sarah, tied up, relaying a message. Havlock wants to trade Sarah for the prisoner Henry. This is their first deal. Frank is baffled but refuses to hand over a prisoner. Sydney convinces him it's the only way. Frank interrogates Henry, asking why he surrendered. Henry refuses to speak, smugly taunting Frank that he'll be out of prison soon anyway. Frank loses his temper, shouting that Henry will rot in a cell forever. At the old house, Luke tries to find a way out, but discovers a man unconscious in the trunk of an abandoned car. He's injured. Unaware this is an escaped convict, Luke and Kira try to revive him. Back in town, Frank realizes his son is missing and orders a search. Havlock calls Bradford, threatening to leak the file if she tries to kill him. Bradford traces the call but fails to pinpoint him. While Havlock is distracted, Sarah manages to untie her hands. Havlock hangs up and realizes she's gone. He hunts her down. Sarah ambushes him, hitting him and grabbing his gun, threatening to shoot. He overpowers her, pushing her down a flight of stairs. She's knocked out and he locks her up again.
Frank agrees to the trade and takes Henry to the drop point, but the location is empty. It was a test. Havlock was checking if Frank would comply, using the trade as a distraction while he executed a different plan. The next day, a prisoner named Sam kidnaps a man and his son. The child escapes to the police station, identifies Sam from photos, and Frank promises to find his dad. Sam, meanwhile, meets up with Havlock and other convicts. Thinking Havlock is a local civilian, Sam takes him hostage. Havlock plays along, pretending to surrender. A tour bus full of sightseers is attacked by Sam's crew, who take everyone hostage. Officers get a signal and plan a rescue. Simultaneously, the police locate Sarah. They raid the location and rescue her. Frank reunites with his wife, who frantically asks about Luke. Frank explains Luke is stranded at the old house and an officer is on the way. He apologizes for putting her in danger. At the old house, the unconscious man wakes up. It's Romeo, a prisoner. He feigns amnesia. Kira goes outside for firewood and finds an empty police cruiser. Inside, she sees wanted posters, and Romeo's face is on one. Terrified, she runs back to save Luke. On the tour bus, Sam realizes Havlock is the masked prisoner from the plane. Havlock is busy transferring data from a laptop to a microchip. Sam attacks him to get the treasure. Havlock drops the act, beats Sam senseless, and takes down the other prisoners, proving he's the alpha. He calls Frank, revealing he has a busload of hostages. His price? The password to Sydney's personnel file. Frank begs Sydney. She refuses, but eventually caves and gives the code. At the old house, Kira warns Luke about Romeo. They try to sneak away, but Romeo catches them. He smashes Luke's phone and takes them hostage. Frank locates Havlock's position. He arrives and negotiates for the release of the kidnapped father, which Havlock grants. Havlock then tells Frank he knows Frank's dark secret, but will keep it if Frank cooperates. Suddenly, Sydney executes a daring move. She uncouples the rear cars of the tour train, freeing the hostages. She then tethers the lead control car, containing Havlock, to a helicopter. The car flips over, the other prisoners fall out and are arrested. Frank is trapped in the dangling car with Havlock as the helicopter lifts it high into the air. They fight. Sydney jumps onto the suspended car. Frank screams at her to shoot Havlock, but she hesitates. She can't do it. She lets him jump and escape. She turns to Frank and drops the truth. "I'm his wife." Frank is stunned.
The next day, the chaos continues. A prisoner named Vivian invades a female officer's home, forcing her to unshackle Vivian and her partner Kitty. They kill the officer, steal her clothes, and flee. Later, at a diner, Vivian steals car keys from a patron, and they escape again. The hospital director tells Sarah to take time off, but she refuses, insisting on going to the old house to find Luke herself. Frank is called and meets her there. At the house, Romeo forces Luke and Kira to help him burn down a power station connected to a military research facility, claiming the government is spying on him. He forces Luke to film it. Luke throws the camera at Romeo and attacks him. Frank and Sarah arrive just as Romeo threatens to kill Luke. Sarah slams her foot on the gas and hits Romeo with the car, ending the threat. They rush Luke to the hospital. That night, the power grid fails. The whole town goes dark. At the hospital, Sarah spots a suspicious paramedic. It's a prisoner, a doctor on death row for murdering 36 patients. He pulls out scissors to kill an injured woman. Frank tackles him just in time. The doctor reveals the plane's pilot is alive, and he knows where he is. Sydney confesses to Frank. She and Havlock invented the plane hack method years ago for the CIA. She believes the agency used their own weapon to crash the plane and kill Havlock to destroy the file.
Frank tracks the pilot, who confirms the plane was hacked and that Havlock helped him land manually to save lives. Frank then investigates a lead on the mercenary, Tiago. He finds an old photo of Tiago with a young girl. It's Sydney and her father. Frank realizes Sydney and Tiago are partners. She caused the crash. Frank confronts Sydney. She admits she plotted with Tiago to crash the plane. Her father was murdered by Bradford. The plan was for Havlock to die in the crash, which would trigger a dead man's switch and publish the files exposing Bradford. But Havlock survived, ruining the plan. In the present, Sydney confronts Havlock. He hands her the microchip hidden in his stomach and warns her Bradford is coming to kill her. Frank arrives, but Sydney escapes. Bradford arrives in Alaska with a hit squad, demanding Frank hand over the prisoners. Frank refuses, citing jurisdiction. Havlock breaks out of prison with Tiago's help. He calls Frank, "I'll find Sydney." Bradford corners Sydney at a relay station where she's trying to upload the file. Havlock and his men arrive, surrounding Bradford. Sydney exposes Bradford's crimes. Bradford admits she sacrificed a few to save many. Sydney grabs the chip and runs. Bradford chases her to a high bridge. They fight viciously. Bradford stabs Sydney in the stomach with scissors. They tumble over the edge, dangling by ropes. Sydney kicks Bradford, sending her plummeting into the icy sea to her death.
Havlock pulls Sydney up. She's bleeding out. Frank arrives. He helps get her to a car, but while Frank calls for an ambulance, Havlock prepares to run. Frank catches him. Havlock plays his final card. "I know you planted a gun on an innocent man years ago to put him in jail. I know your secret." Frank, torn, freezes. He lets Havlock disappear into the night. Frank rushes Sydney to the hospital. She gives him the chip. Later, the police find a burned body in a car and identify it as Havlock. Frank knows it's a fake-out but plays along. He hands the file to a trusted politician to expose the truth. Sydney recovers. Frank tells her Havlock is dead. She doesn't believe him. Frank returns home. He confesses his dark secret, planting the gun to his family, ready to turn himself in. Sarah and Luke refuse to let him destroy their lives. They tell him to bury the past. Frank throws the gun away. The family moves to a new home. In the final scene, Frank gets a phone call. It's Havlock. He's watching Sydney's prison transport convoy. He's going to break her out. Sydney sees him from the bus window and smiles. The end.